What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the top 10 films of 2024. It is that time of the year to discuss the movies that really shaped the year for me. And to be honest, this year has been incredibly difficult because there's so many titles that were incredible, movies that I wasn't anticipating on even watching that I did, and they ended up on this list. So really difficult to make this list. So much so that, of course, I had to do my supplemental video that will be coming out in about a week. And that's going to cover every movie that I recommend by category. I think I've extended it to about 30 categories, and that should be a lot of fun to do. Before we get started, let's talk about some honorable mentions. First off, we have Smile. This movie impressed me. I was not expecting anything going in because the first movie I had actually thought was just all right. I think it was a very traditional horror film. And then with the second film, it didn't seem like a complete cop-out. They had some ideas. They were very creative with the cinematography and the editing, and then this claustrophobic and anxiety-filled tension throughout the movie. The overall experience was quite something for this film. This was one of my favorite horror films of 2024. Next up is Memoir of a Snail, probably one of my favorite animated films of the year. This had me holding back tears. It is such an emotion-packed film with really great claymation and a really great story at its heart. Next up, A Real Pain. Everything about this film feels effortless and charming and funny, from the acting to the writing. And the personalities of these characters, they're all different, and it makes it that much more rewarding to watch as they interact with one another on their journey through Poland. Next up, Love Lies Bleeding. This is the A24 film with Kristen Stewart. This movie stuck around in my top 10 for the longest time, but eventually just got knocked out. I think this is such an energetic thriller with a good amount of distribution of suspenseful twists and interesting character dilemmas. I really love the synth-based score, the 80s color grading to this, and then of course the tone and then the overall performances really shaped this up to be a really incredible thriller. And last but not least is Strange Darling. It's one heck of a sizzling thriller with a lot of jaw-dropping moments and a very committed lead. Being told out of sequence really works well. When we get hit with that finale, it's something that really lingers. I think this is one of the best thrillers of 2024. Just didn't make that top 10. Those are my honorable mentions, and let's go ahead and dive right into the top 10. And number 10 is Anora. When I first saw this film, I really enjoyed this. I think that a lot of what makes this movie so amazing is everything that happens in that second act all the way to its finale. I think that is done to such a T that I almost overlooked any issues that I had with that first act where they're partying so much. This is by far one of my favorite comedies of the year. It's one heck of a wild ride, and pacing is never an issue, and the story kept me engaged. Yes, we're following characters that aren't the most likable, especially if we're judging based on the first act, but their story is interesting nonetheless, and Sean Baker, as always, is able to craft these stories about people that you normally don't hang out with or see. They all have a story to tell, and the story was interesting, and it kept me on board the entire way. And I thought that it was a very fitting finale and a film that really stuck with me by the end of the year. And number 9 is Red Rooms. This was a last-minute addition that I'm really glad I checked out because this had me hooked within the first couple of minutes. I love courtroom dramas, and this started off in a courtroom setting, planting all this information about the serial killer and then tying it into our lead. I think what's really great here is that the lead is such a great complex character that even within the last 20 minutes you still don't know what her motives are. Is she going for justice? Is she just doing this for attention? She's got this poker face to her character, and it makes the direction of this movie unpredictable, and that's what really had me at the edge of my seat. The film's addressing a lot of issues about obsessions and fetishes in this unique and fresh way. I really like the writing, the camera work, the score is really good. Really enjoyed this. This is one heck of a film that had the thrills and the intrigue to be one of 2024's best thrillers. Number 8 is The Substance. The Substance is the wildest and most shocking film I've seen of 2024. It's also one of the most creative films I've seen. I really love the in-camera effects that it's able to pull off. The amount of makeup that they had to put into this movie, really appreciate that. It's also got this great cinematography and editing and sound design that just help elicit this madhouse trip and this sense of discomfort. And We know the consequences before they even happen, but it still engages us because we're curious how far and how terrible things are going to get. This is one heck of a film, and for sure this is one of the most memorable movies of 2024. I really had to put this in my top 10, even if I did have a few issues with its conclusion, but nonetheless, this was such an experience, I could not leave it off this list. At number 7 is Sing Sing. This is one of the more touching films of 2024. Coleman Domingo is flat out amazing in the lead role. It's an authentic film that shines light on the struggles and the ways people cope with their inner demons. The acting is great all around, despite the fact that most of its stars don't have a whole ton of acting experience. It feels very natural, and all the characters mesh in this setting really well. This was one of the most heartwarming films that is really well written, and it brought a sense of humanity to characters that normally would be represented through cliches in this less organic approach. So definitely wanted to include Sing Sing in this list because it was one of the most heartwarming films that I've seen this year, and it definitely deserved a top 10 spot for me. Number 6 is a Polish film called The Peasants. This is one of the most striking films I've seen in 2024. Such a beautifully painted film, and when I say painted, I mean it's literally painted. They shot the film and then they painted over it. It took them 5 years to make this movie, and it's nothing short of greatness. It comes from the creators of Loving Vincent. I was captivated by the imagery, and I was also immersed in the fascinating story that hit on so many levels about the power of community and how quickly it is to lose your family, your wealth, and your reputation. It's got an excellent score, really good sound design that helps this feature leap off the screen even more, and it's just one of those movies this year that when I saw it, I absolutely knew it was going to be in my top 10, and this was pretty hard to actually see this film in theaters because it wasn't distributed very well, but it is available on Netflix now, so I hope more people do check it out. At number 5 is Dune Part 2. Now, this is a film I was not expecting to love. I thought the first film was just okay, and this movie surpassed my expectations. I even think it did better than the book adaptation of that second part of the story. It's such a cinematic marvel and an incredible immersive experience that really capitalizes on everything it set up in that first part. I think the cinematography is jaw-dropping, the score is excellent, sound design and sound mixing is very good. The costuming, I think, is even more impressive in this film, and of course the performances are good. And you know, where I had the problem of the lack of emotions and people emoting in the first film, I feel like that was taken care of a little bit better in this film. Our lead stars in the first installment were an issue. I didn't have an issue with them here. I'm actually very happy with how they captured certain aspects of this book and made them work. There's more mystery in play with it setting into motion things that we're going to see in future films. I think this did everything it needed to pick up from the events of part 1. It expanded the world and its characters, and it stands on its own as a sequel, and it built enough tension and intrigue for that final film. So I really couldn't ask anything else from this film. I think it is a very immersive film that just made things even more grander. I think Denis Villeneuve found even more confidence making this film, and it shows. One of the best sci-fi/fantasy films we have gotten in recent years. Had to include that in the list. At number 4 is Conclave. This is an impeccably written drama that centered around the Pope and the series of scandals, revelations, and deceit. I think everything here is just done on a masterful level, from the writing, the editing, the score, the gorgeous cinematography, the incredible performances. It just draws you into the story immediately. This is an entirely dialogue-driven film with a PG rating that was able to keep my focus for 2 hours and never let go. I don't know many films that are able to do that. Religion isn't like the most fascinating subject for me, and I was glued to my seat watching this. And even on rewatch, I still loved it just as much. The reason why it's so high is because it's a movie that just felt so effortless but so powerful, and the writing just treated its audience with the utmost respect and not trying to dumb things down and over-explain with a bunch of exposition, because it is a very dialogue-driven film that could have quickly gone the opposite direction and just failed. And this movie never stopped letting go. Like, this was one of the tensest experiences I had in theaters, and definitely a film to check out. At number 3 is Furiosa. This is pretty shocking. Like, I had such low expectations for this movie. When the trailers came out, I actually wasn't interested in even seeing it. I thought Anya Taylor-Joy was kind of a miscast. And now that I've seen the film, you know, I don't have an issue with it at all. I think this is actually a superb film. I might actually even like this more than the original. George Miller, I mean, he's able to pump this adrenaline-filled ride once again, which is pretty incredible given his age. These incredible action sequences and stunt work, they're just to die for. I mean, the editing paired with that sound design, they just grab you immediately. I really like the cinematography and all the wide-angle shots that show the vastness of this desert wasteland, and I really appreciated the detailing and the costuming and the makeup, and everything feels kind of weathered and lived in. It did take some time to get, you know, adjusted to Chris Hemsworth's nose and stuff, but everything here is just so committed and calculated, and it does such a fantastic job of selling us on this danger that's around us. You know, it is a long film, but with its 5-act structure, I think it just ended up intensifying each act, and it made it that much more engaging to watch. There's a good amount of visual-based storytelling that suits the film very well, and it's a blast to watch this film. Now, this movie didn't do too well at the box office, but it's one of the best action films this year, which is very surprising that not a whole lot of people ended up seeing it. So give this movie some love, check it out, it's pretty darn great. And number 2 is Exhibiting Forgiveness. Sometimes it's the more personal stories that really hit home, and Exhibiting Forgiveness was a movie that hit me emotionally more than any other movie this year. It's an emotionally stirring film about trying to cope with family division and the past and how it catches up to you. It's got an incredible visceral performance from Andre Holland, who grabs this role heads on, and it's supported with a really good cast. And this is one of those movies that is very layered. It feels raw and authentic. Characters are complex. It doesn't have these conventional cliche black and white resolutions, and I really appreciated that in this film. One of the things I love about movies is when you experience something that you forget that you're watching a film, and this was one of those experiences. I really appreciated the filmmaking of this, and what made it even more impressive was this is a debut film. This was a movie that aired in theaters for about a week or so and barely filled any seats in the theater. And sometimes it's one of those movies, like, you know, you go to a movie that you don't know anything about, and those are the movies that stick with you. And this was that movie. And rewatching it, it just confirmed that this movie really was something for me. And that's why it's my number 2. And at number 1 is Challengers. This was a pretty hard decision. It was always at my number 1, but I didn't know if some of these other titles were going to beat it or not. But at the end of the day, the experience I had watching this felt like 3 chess games happening at the same time with just tennis. There is so much going on inside these characters' heads that each layer that it's adding adds an extra bit of complexity to the characters and, you know, where each person stands. It's less about tennis and more about the character interactions and their decisions. Chemistry is fantastic between the 3 leads. Editing was beautifully crafted, especially during the tennis matches. The score kept the energy pumping, and the ending, it was just very satisfying and left enough room for you to form your own conclusion. And that's really the greatest part of movies, when they leave things ambiguous. At least in my eyes, I love when they do that, because that is when you realize how much rewatchability you have and how many different ways you can piece together the story and what these characters were thinking internally. It's got a very interesting sound mix. It's very well written, and on rewatch, I was still engaged with this story and these characters and all the mind games this movie is playing. I was just thrilled to rewatch this, and it just brought a smile on my face every time I watch it. Like, really great movie, and my favorite film of 2024. So yeah, guys, those were my top 10 picks. They were not easy to pick. I was shuffling these around all over the place, even like a couple of days ago. So be curious to check out some of the titles that you enjoyed in 2024. Please leave your top 10 list down below. And thank you guys so much for watching. Please hit that like down below and subscribe to the channel for more videos. And I will see you guys later.